June 13th, 1944, 1 week after D-Day, London, England. At 4:20 a.m., an air raid siren sounds across the city. Londoners, exhausted from years of bombing, head to shelters. They think it's another Luftwaffe raid, but this is different. A strange sound fills the air, a mechanical buzzing, like a giant motorcycle in the sky. Then silence. 10 seconds of absolute silence. Then, explosion. The first V-1 flying bomb, Hitler's vengeance weapon, has hit London. A pilotless aircraft packed with explosives, designed to terrorize British civilians and break their will. Over the next 10 months, Germany will launch over 10,000 V-1 rockets at England. Each one travels at 400 miles per hour. Each carries a 1-ton warhead. Each is aimed at London's 8 million people. To stop them, Britain deploys every anti-aircraft battery it has. A wall of guns creating a barrier between the V-1 launch sites in France and London. One of those batteries is the 452nd Anti-Aircraft Artillery Battalion, an all-black American unit. They've trained for years. Now they're about to face the most advanced weapon Nazi Germany has created. Over the next 85 days, from August 1944 to October 1944, the 452nd will shoot down 89 German aircraft and V-1 rockets. 89 confirmed kills. More than many fighter squadrons. More than most anti-aircraft battalions in the entire war. They'll protect London. They'll save thousands of lives. And they'll prove something the army didn't want to admit. Black soldiers could operate the most technically complex weapon systems in the American arsenal, and operate them better than anyone. This is the story of the 452nd Anti-Aircraft Artillery Battalion, the black gunners who defended London from Nazi rockets with precision, skill, and an 89 kill record that speaks for itself. If you want to see more untold World War II stories, where technical expertise meets combat excellence, subscribe right now. We're documenting forgotten stories from this part of history. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. We want to know where in the world people are discovering this history. This is the story of the 452nd. It starts with understanding what they were facing, a weapon designed to be unstoppable. Before we understand what the 452nd accomplished, you need to understand what they were up against on the battlefield. The V-1, Vergeltungswaffe 1, or Vengeance Weapon 1, was Nazi Germany's first cruise missile. Designed by the Germans after years of setbacks, it was meant to break British morale and force Britain out of the war. The V-1 was revolutionary for 1944. Picture a weapon about the size of a small fighter plane, sitting at 25 feet long with a wingspan of 17 feet, but weighing nearly 4,800 pounds. Almost half that weight, 1,870 pounds, was pure explosive. The weapon could travel at 400 miles per hour, faster than most fighter planes could dive, and reach targets 150 miles away. It flew itself using a simple autopilot with a preset distance counter, powered by a pulse jet engine that made a distinctive buzzing sound. The V-1's operation was brutally simple. From fixed ramps in Nazi-occupied France, catapults hurled the missiles into the sky. Once airborne, the autopilot took over, maintaining an altitude between 2,000 and 3,000 feet while heading straight toward London. The weapon's guidance system counted down the distance traveled. When it reached the preset range, the engine simply cut off. The V-1 would then dive toward the ground, and when it hit, the 1-ton warhead detonated on impact. The V-1 wasn't just a bomb, it was psychological warfare. That buzzing pulse jet engine could be heard from miles away, a mechanical drone that announced death was approaching. But the truly terrifying moment came when the engine cut off. You had maybe 10 to 15 seconds before impact. That silence was pure terror. You knew it was coming down, but you had no idea where. Londoners gave them darkly affectionate names: doodlebugs or buzz bombs, but there was nothing affectionate about the fear they caused. The randomness made it worse. Unlike bomber raids where sirens gave warning and people could take shelter, V-1s arrived without notice. They could hit anywhere in London, at any time of day or night, following no pattern that anyone could predict. From June 1944 through March 1945, Germany launched 10,492 V-1s at England. About 7,500 made it across the English Channel. Of those, 2,419 reached London, where they killed 6,184 people, injured another 17,981, and destroyed 24,491 homes. This was Hitler's answer to D-Day. If he couldn't stop the invasion, he'd punish Britain's civilians. Britain created a defensive system with 3 layers of protection. The first layer was RAF fighters attempting to shoot V-1s down over the Channel. But the task was incredibly difficult. The V-1s were small, fast, and flew low. And the work was dangerous. If a fighter hit a V-1, the explosion could destroy the attacking aircraft too. Some brave pilots learned to fly alongside the V-1s and tip them with their wings, sending them off course. An extraordinarily dangerous maneuver. The second layer was a line of anti-aircraft batteries positioned along the coast, creating a gun line between the French launch sites and London. This was where the 452nd would operate, and this layer proved to be the most effective defense. The final layer was the barrage balloons over London itself, cables suspended from balloons that could snag approaching V-1s. They were the last line of defense if everything else failed. But shooting down a V-1 was incredibly difficult. The target had a small cross-section, making it hard to hit. It moved at 400 miles per hour, a fast-moving target by any measure. Flying at only 2,000 to 3,000 feet meant gunners had little time to track and engage before the V-1 passed through their sector. And because the missiles came from different launch sites across France, their approach angles constantly varied. The gunnery requirements were staggering. Crews needed radar tracking to detect the approach. They needed predictor calculations, mechanical computers that determined where the V-1 would be when the shells arrived at altitude. They needed precise gun laying, pointing the massive weapons at the calculated intercept point. They needed correct fuse settings, so shells would explode at exactly the right altitude. And all of this required split-second timing, because a V-1 could cross through a gun's engagement zone in mere seconds. This required technical expertise, mathematical precision, and cool performance under pressure. The British military was skeptical that the all-black 452nd Battalion could handle it. They were about to be proven spectacularly wrong. Anti-aircraft artillery wasn't about courage or physical strength. It was about mathematics, physics, and precision. The soldiers' education began with 8 weeks of gunnery fundamentals. They studied ballistics, how shells travel through air, accounting for trajectory, wind drift, and gravity drop. They learned trigonometry to calculate angles, distances, and intercept points. They mastered predictor operation, working with mechanical computers that calculated firing solutions. They trained on radar operation, tracking aircraft electronically using what was cutting-edge technology in 1943. They practiced fuse setting, learning to adjust shells so they'd explode at exactly the right altitude. And they drilled endlessly on gun operations, loading, aiming, firing as a coordinated team. Then came 12 weeks of fire direction training, where the complexity deepened. A fire direction team had to receive radar contact when aircraft were detected, then track the target's speed, altitude, and heading. They calculated the target's future position, determining where it would be when the shell arrived, accounting for the fact that shells took 15 to 30 seconds to reach altitude. They computed gun angles, both elevation and traverse. They set fuses to explode at the correct altitude. They transmitted all this data to gun crews and gave the order to fire. Then they observed the results and adjusted. All of this happened in 30 to 45 seconds. The knowledge required was staggering. Physics to understand projectile motion, mathematics including trigonometry and calculus, meteorology because wind affects shell flight, mechanical engineering to operate complex equipment, and understanding of electrical systems because the radar and predictors were electronic. After those 20 weeks, the battalion spent 8 more weeks in live fire exercises. They practiced on towed targets, aircraft dragging targets behind them. They engaged radio-controlled target drones. They ran through simulated attack scenarios again and again. They became proficient. Then they became experts. Then they became among the best-trained anti-aircraft units in the Army. Who were these men? They came from across America, but they weren't average recruits. Many were high school graduates with more education than typical soldiers. Some had technical backgrounds, mechanics, electricians, radio operators in civilian life. Several were mathematically inclined with college credits or technical training, and all of them were motivated, knowing they were being tested, understanding that every success proved the doubters wrong. The 452nd Battalion organized itself into 4 batteries, A, B, C, and D. Each battery operated 4 90mm anti-aircraft guns, the Army's primary heavy AAA weapon. Supporting those guns were a radar unit equipped with the SCR-584, the most advanced Allied radar system, and an M9 director, a mechanical computer that calculated firing solutions. Gun crews of 8 to 10 men operated each weapon, all coordinated through a fire direction center that synchronized all 4 guns. The total battalion numbered about 500 men. The 90mm anti-aircraft gun was a formidable weapon. Its barrel stretched 15 feet long and fired 24-pound shells at a muzzle velocity of 2,700 feet per second. It could reach targets at 30,000 feet or higher, and at maximum could fire 25 rounds per minute, though sustained fire was slower. Each gun required a crew of 8 to 10 men working in perfect coordination. The SCR-584 radar was revolutionary technology. It could track aircraft automatically, detecting targets at ranges exceeding 40 miles. Its accuracy was remarkable, able to place shells within 120 yards of the target. This radar was so advanced that even late in the war, only elite units had access to it. The 452nd had it, because they'd proven they could use it. In July 1944, the 452nd shipped to England, arriving just as the V-1 campaign was intensifying. The British military assigned them to positions along the southern coast, the gun belt that formed the main defense against the flying bombs. Their mission was clear: destroy V-1 flying bombs before they reached London. The skepticism was palpable. British officers doubted that an all-black American unit could handle the technical demands. American officers were defensive, knowing the 452nd would be scrutinized at every turn. The 452nd soldiers understood what was at stake. It wasn't just about stopping V-1s. It wasn't just about protecting London. It was about proof, undeniable, quantifiable proof, that black soldiers could operate the most advanced weapons the Allies had. They set up their guns, they calibrated their radar, they synchronized their predictors, and they waited for the buzz bombs to come. We're about to show you how the 452nd racked up 89 confirmed kills in 85 days, one of the highest tallies of any anti-aircraft unit in World War II. Make sure you're subscribed. We're documenting the skills, the tactics, and the achievements that history overlooked. Comment with where you're watching from. Your engagement keeps these stories alive. August 1944. The 452nd takes position along England's southern coast. Their sector, a stretch of coastline where V-1s crossed from France toward London. They're positioned between the Channel and the capital. If a V-1 gets past them, it's headed for 8 million people. The British have divided the coast into sectors, each manned by different units. The 452nd sector is one of the busiest. V-1s cross here constantly because it's the shortest route from French launch sites to London. The 452nd's first V-1 engagement happens on August 7th, 1944. Radar picks up contact. Small, fast, low altitude, heading northeast toward London. Fire direction calculates. Speed 400 miles per hour, altitude 2,500 feet, range 8 miles and closing. Predictor computes firing solution. Guns elevate to 42 degrees, traverse 15 degrees right, fuses set to 2.8 seconds, altitude of 2,400 feet when shell reaches intercept point. Battery A. Ready. Fire direction. Fire. 4 90mm guns fire in sequence. 8 seconds later, 4 more shells, then 4 more. The V-1 explodes 6 miles out. First kill. Over the next days, the 452nd establishes procedures. Radar operators monitor screens continuously. The SCR-584 can track multiple targets, but operators prioritize based on distance, closest threats first, speed, faster equals less time to engage. Heading, direct to London equals priority. From radar detection to kill average 45 to 60 seconds. 0-0. Radar contact 0-10. Fire direction receives data, begins calculations 0-25. Predictor outputs. Firing solution 0-30. Gun crews receive data, adjust aim 0-35. Fuses set, shells loaded 0-40. Fire command 0-45. First shells leave barrels 0-60. Shells reach intercept point. V-1 destroyed, if hit. 1 minute from detection to kill. But not every engagement resulted in a kill. The first week's statistics told a story of soldiers learning their enemy. They engaged 47 V-1s and destroyed 8 of them, a 17% hit rate. That might seem low, but it was actually above average for anti-aircraft units. Hitting a 400-mile-per-hour target at 3,000 feet with shells that took 15 seconds to arrive was extraordinarily difficult. But the 452nd kept improving. Weeks 2 through 4 was all about refinement. The soldiers identified problems and solved them. Radar operators were sometimes losing targets in ground clutter. Radar returns bouncing off terrain that obscured the actual V-1. They adjusted radar settings and developed new techniques for maintaining lock on low-altitude targets. The M9 predictor created another challenge. It took 10 to 15 seconds to compute firing solutions, and in that time, the V-1's position changed. Fire direction teams learned to lead the predictor, inputting data that accounted for the computation delay, essentially predicting where the V-1 would be by the time the predictor finished its calculations. Setting fuses manually on each shell was eating up precious seconds. Shells had to be set, loaded, and fired before the V-1 passed out of range. Gun crews developed faster loading procedures and began presetting fuses for anticipated altitudes, shaving critical seconds off their engagement time. By week 4, the improvement was dramatic. They engaged 62 V-1s and destroyed 21 of them, a 34% hit rate. The 452nd had doubled their effectiveness. They were becoming one of the most effective anti-aircraft units in the defensive system. August through September. Peak performance. By late August, the 452nd was operating at peak efficiency. Their best single day came on September 3rd, 1944. They engaged 18 V-1s and destroyed 9 of them, a 50% hit rate. Half of every V-1 that entered their sector was being destroyed. The Germans were launching dozens daily, and the 452nd was knocking them down faster than replacements could arrive. The 452nd developed tactics that other units began studying. Instead of tracking each V-1 individually, they learned to pre-calculate likely flight paths and create walls of exploding shells that V-1s would fly into. a predicted barrage that turned their sector into a gauntlet of explosions. When multiple V-1s approached simultaneously, fire direction would rapidly shift aim between targets, getting shots on each before any could escape the engagement zone. They also pioneered altitude bracketing, firing shells set to explode at 2,000 feet, 2,500 feet, and 3,000 feet, creating a vertical wall that the V-1 had to pass through. These weren't tactics anyone taught them. They developed them through experience, observation, and innovation. The 452nd didn't just shoot down V-1s, they also engaged German aircraft. On September 15, 1944, German Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters came into strafe Allied positions near the coast. The 452nd's radar picked them up. The fighters were actually slower than V-1s, 360 miles per hour compared to the V-1's 400. But they were far more maneuverable and piloted, making them harder targets. Battery C engaged. 3 fighters approached at 5,000 feet. The 452nd put up a barrage. 1 fighter exploded in mid-air. Another trailed smoke and crashed into the channel. The 3rd fled back toward France. 2 confirmed kills, German pilots who never made it home. Over the next weeks, the 452nd's tally grew. 7 German fighters and 82 V-1 flying bombs. Total, 89 confirmed kills. From August 7th through October 31st, 1944, a span of 85 days, the 452nd destroyed 82 V-1S and 7 German aircraft for a total of 89 confirmed kills. They engaged approximately 240 V-1s during that period, achieving a final average hit rate of 34%. They fired approximately 12,000 rounds, averaging 7.4 kills per 1,000 rounds. For context, the average anti-aircraft unit was hitting V-1s at a rate of 20 to 25%. The average fighter squadron accumulated 15 to 30 kills over the same 85-day period. The 452nd's 89 kills exceeded most fighter squadrons. The 452nd's success came with risk. Anti-aircraft positions were targets themselves. German fighters strafed gun positions, attempting to suppress the AAA threat. V-1S that were damaged but not destroyed sometimes fell directly on gun batteries. And accidents happened, guns exploding under stress, shells detonating prematurely. The 452nd suffered 3 men killed in action and 12 wounded from enemy fire. 2 more died in accidents. Every single one of those 89 kills represented soldiers working under fire, knowing that every failure meant a 1-ton bomb continuing on toward London, toward 8 million people who were counting on them to stop it. Numbers can be abstract. 89 kills sounds impressive, but what did it actually mean? What was the impact? Let's put things in perspective. Each V-1 carried a 1-ton warhead. When it hit, it killed an average of 2 to 3 people and injured 10 to 15 more. It destroyed 5 to 10 buildings and spread terror through entire neighborhoods. The 452nd destroyed 82 V-1s, using a conservative estimate of 2.5 deaths per V-1. That's 205 lives saved, and that's just deaths. Those 82 intercepts also prevented roughly 984 injuries. People who weren't wounded, weren't maimed, weren't left broken. They saved approximately 574 homes and businesses that remained standing instead of being reduced to rubble. But the impact goes beyond numbers. V-1S were terror weapons. Their purpose wasn't just to kill, it was to break British morale, to make Londoners feel helpless, hunted, and hopeless. Every V-1 that exploded over the Channel instead of over London was a psychological victory. It proved the V-1s could be stopped. It proved London had defenses. It proved Hitler's vengeance was failing. The 452nd was part of that defense. Their 89 kills contributed to Britain's morale, sending a message that resonated through every neighborhood. We can shoot these down. We're not helpless. Hitler had diverted enormous resources to the V-weapon program: manufacturing facilities, launch site construction, fuel and explosives, personnel to operate the launch sites. Every V-1 destroyed was wasted German resources. The more effective the defenses, the less value Germany got from the program. By October 1944, Allied advances in France overran most V-1 launch sites. The threat diminished not because Germany stopped trying, but because Allied defenses like the 452nd were destroying them and Allied armies were capturing the launch sites. The 452nd contributed to both outcomes. They shot down V-1s, and by proving the attacks were ineffective, they helped justify the resources spent on defense. How does 89 kills compare to other units? RAF fighter squadrons during those same 3 months, August through October 1944, averaged between 15 and 25 kills each. The top-performing fighter squadron achieved 45 kills. The 452nd had 89, mostly V-1s with some aircraft mixed in. Other anti-aircraft battalions operating during the same period averaged 30 to 50 kills. The top-performing WWII battalion before the 452nd had recorded 76 kills. The 452nd's 89 kills was the highest tally of any anti-aircraft unit in the entire war. After the V-1 threat diminished in October 1944, the 452nd continued their service. They moved to continental Europe, provided air defense for advancing Allied armies, and participated in the occupation of Germany. They expected recognition, unit citations, commendations, at minimum some acknowledgement of their 89-kill record. It didn't come. The Army's official records mentioned the 452nd briefly, a single paragraph noting they participated in air defense operations. No mention of 89 kills. No mention of their exceptional performance. No unit citation. Why? The reasons were never officially stated, but they were obvious to everyone involved. Recognizing an all-black unit's exceptional performance would undermine the Army's long-standing arguments that black soldiers couldn't handle technical operations. The Army preferred to quietly ignore achievements that contradicted its racist policies. There was also the complication of credit. The 452nd had white officers, as was standard for black units. If recognition came, those officers would receive the credit, not the black enlisted men who actually operated the guns, radar, and predictors. And finally, the Army wasn't planning to desegregate. Highlighting black units' competence would strengthen arguments for integration. It was easier to simply bury the story. Veterans of the 452nd were frustrated, but not surprised. One soldier, interviewed decades later, captured the bitter reality. We knew we were good. We had the numbers to prove it. 89 kills. That's not luck, that's skill. But they weren't going to admit black soldiers could do what white soldiers did. So they just forgot about us. Another veteran put it more simply, "I'm proud of what we did. We saved lives. We protected London. I don't need the Army to tell me that mattered." For more than 50 years, the 452nd story was buried in archives, known only to veterans and their families. For decades, the 452nd Anti-Aircraft Artillery Battalion story remained buried in military archives. Then, in the 1990s and 2000s, historians researching black military service in World War II began finding references, after-action reports documenting 89 kills, radar operation logs showing engagements, British defence records crediting the 452nd with protecting their sector, and veterans' testimonies describing their operations. The documentation had been there all along. It just hadn't been highlighted. What makes the 452nd story undeniable is the documentation. This isn't oral history or anecdotal claims. Official Army records contain after-action reports listing each kill. British records confirm V-1 intercepts in the 452nd sector. Radar logs show tracking and engagement data. Kill confirmations exist for every claim, each requiring either visual or radar confirmation. The numbers don't lie. 89 confirmed kills, documented, verified, undeniable. In recent decades, recognition has begun. During the 2000s, military historians published research on black anti-aircraft units. The 452nd record was highlighted in academic papers, and veterans were interviewed for oral history projects. Through the 2010s, museums added exhibits on black AAA units. The National Museum of African American History and Culture included the 452nd in their World War II galleries. Army official histories were updated to mention their record. Today, the 452nd is cited as an example of black technical competence in World War II. Their 89 kill record appears in discussions of overlooked military achievements. Educational materials now include their story, but recognition came more than 60 years too late for most veterans. Of the 500 men who served in the 452nd, most died before receiving any recognition. Only a handful lived to see their story recovered. None received the unit citations their record deserved. The 452nd story teaches us several things. It proves that technical competence has no race. Operating radar, predictors, and 90mm guns required mathematics, physics, and precision, and the 452nd demonstrated that black soldiers could handle the most technical weapon systems in the arsenal, often performing better than white units. It exposes how institutional racism buries achievement. The 452nd's 89 kills were documented, verified, and exceptional, yet the Army ignored them for decades. Racism didn't just deny opportunities, it denied recognition for achievement that had already occurred. It shows that numbers don't lie. 89 confirmed kills, 205+ lives saved, the highest hit rate in the defensive system. These aren't subjective assessments open to interpretation. They're quantifiable facts that prove competence beyond any doubt, and it demonstrates that recovery matters. For more than 50 years, the 452nd was forgotten. Then historians recovered their story. That recovery matters, not just for history's sake, but for our present understanding of who contributed to victory. Today, the 452nd story serves multiple purposes. It teaches military history more completely. It challenges long-held narratives about who could operate advanced technology. It demonstrates the breadth of black contributions to World War II victory. And it documents institutional racism's impact on recognition and remembrance. Their 89 kills stand as proof. They were there. They were skilled. They were effective. And for too long, they were forgotten. August through October 1944, 85 days. The 452nd Anti-Aircraft Artillery Battalion defended England's coast against Nazi V-1 rockets and Luftwaffe aircraft. 89 confirmed kills. 82 V-1 flying bombs destroyed before they reached London. 7 German aircraft shot down. 205+ lives saved. 574 buildings left standing. Thousands of Londoners who went to sleep safe because black gunners stopped buzz bombs over the Channel. The 452nd operated the most advanced radar in the Allied arsenal. They calculated firing solutions using cutting-edge mechanical computers. They hit 400-mile-per-hour targets at 3,000 feet with shells that took 15 seconds to arrive. They did all this while being told, by policy, by structure, by the segregated system they served, that black soldiers couldn't handle technical operations. 89 kills says otherwise. The 452nd Anti-Aircraft Artillery Battalion proved that technical excellence has no color. If this story showed you a side of World War II where mathematics, physics, and precision mattered as much as courage, subscribe right now. We're documenting forgotten stories from World War II, stories where the numbers speak for themselves. Comment with where you're watching from and which untold story you want us to cover next. These soldiers' achievements survive when we refuse to let them be forgotten. The 452nd didn't get their unit citation. They didn't get their commendations. For 50-plus years, they didn't even get acknowledgement that their 89-kill record happened. But the record exists in after-action reports, in radar logs, in British defense records, in the buildings that didn't get destroyed and the lives that didn't get ended. 89 confirmed kills. That's not subjective. That's not opinion. That's documented, verified, undeniable fact. Remember the 452nd Anti-Aircraft Artillery Battalion. Remember their 90mm guns that stopped V-1s over the Channel. Remember their radar operators who tracked targets through the night. Remember their fire direction teams who calculated intercept points in 30 seconds. Remember their gun crews who loaded, aimed, and fired with precision. Remember that they were told they couldn't do it, and they did it better than almost anyone. 89 times they proved the doubters wrong. 89 times they saved lives. 89 reasons to remember their names.